We're going to start today. We're going to be opening in prayer by Mr. Wiggins, and Mr. Blockhouse will lead us in the pledge. Mr. Wiggins.
Please bow our heads, please. Dear Lord, thank you for another day of life, health, and strength. Thank you for the opportunity for those that are here to listen, learn, and make decisions relating to the leader of our school system, the leader of your children. Bless us to make the right decision. Bless us to be deliberate in what we're doing. Take care of us. Keep us in thy keeping care. In our son Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Flag, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody that's here in the crowd today. Appreciate you coming out. Item 2.01 is interviews for superintendent, a portion of which interviews may be held in executive session pursuant to LARS 4217A1. I'll just kind of give you a quick overview of how the interviews are going to go today. Here in just a moment, we will have our first applicant come in. They will give us a 5-minute opening remark statement, and then after that we will start on this end of the horseshoe, and each board member will ask one question, and the applicant will then answer those questions. Once all the board members have completed asking their one question, Sonia Bales will be asking 2 questions, and those 2 questions were randomly chosen from our school system website that were sent in by teachers and parents and possibly even students of our system. So after those 2 questions are asked, we will then have a 5-minute wrap-up closing statement by the applicant, and then from there we will probably take a 5-minute break, and then we will move on to the second interview. Again, thank you all very much for coming out and being part of this process. And with that being said, Ms. Poole, I think we are ready for our first applicant. I will, before, one more thing. Mr. Glenn Bullard is with us right now on the live feed. Glenn woke up this morning, was very ill, and felt like it might be a stomach bug or something that he could pass on to the rest of us. So I asked him to stay at home, and I will be asking his question for him. And he is, like I said, listening, and he'll be hopefully be back here with us tomorrow.
Me?
Nope, not yet. Wait.
I didn't understand you.
No, we're just waiting now on the applicant,
Okay.
Mr. Slack.
I think I'm starting, aren't I?
Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Doctor. Our first applicant that we'll be interviewing is Dr. Vicki Younger. Dr. Younger, I'm turning it over to you for your 5-minute opening remarks.
All right. Thank you so much, President Cheatham, to the board members, and to our public who is here today. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Vicki Younger, and I'd like to be the next superintendent of the Bossier Parish School System. I believe when we finish today, you will see that I have many qualities that will serve me well as I serve you and the students and the teachers of this district. I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about who I am first, and then we'll get into some of the qualifications. But I've always wanted to be an educator. From the time I was a little girl, I always wanted to, have my little animals lined up and teaching them. And I grew up in a home of an educator. I'm actually a 4th-generation educator. My mother retired with 30-plus years in elementary education. My grandmother and all of her sisters went to the Northwestern Normal School at that time. And then my great-grandfather was also a teacher. So I don't know if it can be in your DNA, but if it can be, I can tell you it's here. And I'm super excited to be able to marry that with what I believe are some leadership skills as well that really have prepared me to lead this district. I started out, the majority of my experience was in the elementary school, and it was at that point that I really learned to teach reading. And I believe reading is the foundation of everything, because if you learn how to read, you can learn how to do just about anything else. So I know what the good characteristics and strong elements are of a good reading program. I also learned at that point what good engagement looks like, because if you can keep 25 first graders engaged, you're doing a really good job. I also, at that point, began to take on some leadership roles within my school. Even very early on, I had student teachers and method students that I was able to teach and to guide as they began their careers in education. I quickly moved to the academic magnet school that was there at the time. I also had a 2-year stint at the collegiate level where I was asked to come and help rewrite programs for their alternate education program at LSU in Alexandria. I had a great time there, but knew in my heart that I didn't like the college. I really wanted to be back in public education. So I went back to the classroom, spent a few years there, continuing to hone my skills, and then we moved into an assistant principalship for a year. I worked under a phenomenal educator. She was actually a national distinguished principal, so I had a great mentor there. And when she retired, I took her position at Forest Hill Elementary in Rapides Parish for 5 years. Now, we were a TAP school, and I know at one point we had some TAP schools here, but really learned what it was like to coach and mentor teachers through that program. Had experienced a lot of success there. In my last year as principal, we grew 7.9 points. I was very proud of that because that's a school that's Title I school. It's a rural school. It was very diverse in terms of the student population. We had 40% of our students were Hispanic. So I had everything from the rich plant nursery owners to the migrants that had just come across the border and were seeking work and coming to work in the plant nurseries there. So really was, I feel like, a great experience for me to be able to reach all types of students and their parents. One day I got a call from the superintendent, and he said, I've got an opening at central office. Our director of personnel is taking a leave for a year. Would you be interested in it? Now, I'll tell you, at that time, I had no desire to be a personnel director because I just didn't have that experience, but considered it, went home, husband and family, we prayed about it and felt like that was the direction we needed to go. Accepted, that call was on a Wednesday, told my staff on Thursday, and Friday he sent a group from the central office to help me close out the school year, and on Monday I was at central office. So that was a very quick turnaround, and you want to talk about baptism by fire, most definitely that was it, because Ms. Poole will tell you that the most busy time for HR is during May, because that's when every day is like Black Friday, where everybody's just coming in and it's crazy. But learn the job and really learn what it takes to lead a district from that position, because everything revolves around personnel. You've got to have people to do everything. You've got to have the right people in the right places. I learned about policy at that point too, how important it was to know the policy, be firmly grounded in that, and then be able to share that with principals as you guided them so that they don't make missteps. Because in that position, if you make a misstep, then you're getting a call from an attorney or a union rep or something, and you're messing with people's livelihood. So you've got to make sure that you're doing the right thing every time. Also at that time, I was working on my doctorate degree, which was has really prepared me well. I did do that also in educational leadership. My dissertation actually came from my experiences in the Human Resources Department, because our district was being sued for free speech and social media. So I ended up doing my dissertation on the free speech rights of school employees and a framework for social media policies for districts. So that was really interesting, and because of the work I did there, I was afforded some opportunities to go and present. I presented at the ULL Law Conference that they have each year. I presented to the Southeast Regional group that meets in New Orleans every year, and then I went to Phoenix and presented to the American Association of School Personnel at their national conference in Phoenix, and then I even got to go to the National Law Conference in San Diego and present there. So I had some really great experiences that came out of that time. So really, I feel like those experiences have prepared me to be able to come and to work here in this district. My superintendent was also very kind. He knew, and when I told him, when I took the position, that I at one point, aspired to be a superintendent, and so he allowed me to work on some things that kind of, that line, the job description that says, and other things as assigned. I got a lot of and other things as assigned. So I worked on cases where there were, claims of harassment, so I got to go and do investigations. Of course, with HR, you do things like ADA compliance hearings. I also worked on OCR complaints to see if, and those of course come from the federal government, and what happens if those don't work in your favor. So I had a lot of experiences that I really felt like shaped me and have molded me to this point. We worked a lot on planning, strategic planning, to be able to move the district in different areas and to address, when you have a low-performing school, what are some things that we can do at the district level to help push those schools forward and see them succeed. So kind of in a nutshell, that's kind of who I am and where I am to this point. I feel like the last piece of my experiences was coming here to work at Central Park Elementary. I was brought in, was told that it would be very difficult to come in as a principal, but I believed in my heart that's where I needed to be. The school that I was in before was a high-performing, high-poverty school, and the school that I was placed in was an underperforming, high-poverty school, and we've worked very, very hard these last 14 months to turn that around. We've put in some great, I've got a great staff. We've put in some very strong programs and supports for our students, and we're seeing that growth. And I feel like that's the last piece that I needed to be able to sit in that chair and to lead this district as we move forward. So in a nutshell, that's Vicki Younger, and I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Younger. We're going to start with our questions with Mr. Slack.
All right. Is there any reason why you're starting with me?
Just starting this way and going around.
Okay, well, I feel very lucky because it's a very impressive presentation, Dr. Younger.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we're glad to have you in Bossier Parish. I have not met you before, but I'm sure that you'll do a good job of whatever you do. But I read your resume and a lot of the things you said, and I appreciate that so much. And it's an honor and privilege for me to be able to start this thing, I guess. It may not be after I get through. But the first question I have is a two-part question. It's during your time as a school administrator, what was your proudest achievement? And the second part is your greatest failure.
I think my greatest achievement was the fact that being in a high-performing, high-poverty school, we continued to make progress. And even in that last year that I talked about, we had the 7.9 points of growth. I feel like that was huge because it was an everyday doing everything you can every day, all hands on deck to make that happen. It doesn't happen by accident, so there were lots of intentional things that we put in place with strong RTI, with a strong reading program, with lots of targeted professional development to make sure that the teachers had the tools they need to be successful. So if the kid didn't get it when they tried this method, they had, B, C, and D that they could choose from in order to help our students. It was building in time within the school day to have time to remediate students. And not only that, but also to accelerate those students who were able to move further. Now, my biggest sometimes when you speak truth to people, you have to be very careful how you do it. And I think maybe earlier in my career, maybe sometimes I wasn't as smooth with that as I feel like I am now, because truth sometimes hurts, and you don't ever want to hurt people's feelings. So I feel like maybe that's a place where I've really grown as an administrator, because you have to be able, as an administrator, you sometimes have to have those tough conversations, and you got to know how to tell people what they need to hear in order to be better. And I think maybe learning how to do that, definitely through HR, because those are some tough conversations, but you learn how to say it professionally, so that at the end of the day, you may not agree with everything that I said, but you know that I've come at it from a standpoint of love for the person and a love of students, and I think that makes it much easier to accept when you understand that that's where one's coming from.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mercer?
Dr. Younger, I apologize for being late. I got stuck in traffic, and I'm sticking to that excuse. Thank you for being here. It's a privilege to have you. My question is, typically, when a president takes office, he's given 100 days to accomplish something or to, in a sense, form an agenda. And so my question would be, and it's very simple, what do you find the greatest challenge today to the Bossier school system, having been involved in it now and knowing the nuts and bolts? And in the first 100 days, what would be your goal to remedy or come up with a plan for it?
Sure. I'll refer you to page 3 of the document that's in front of you. I do have a 90-day entrance plan of things that I would do just to become, to have a better, a more global sense, I think, of what some of the needs are. In terms of a specific concern, I feel like overall our school system has a very good reputation, but I think we need to continue to build that. When you have a few kinks in the armor that have come up, you have to work on kind of rebranding, and I think the system as a whole has a very positive, and most people have a very positive opinion of our system, but I think just continuing to hone that in, talk about the good things that are going on, trying to make sure that we talk about all of the positives and overriding the negatives, trying to downplay those negatives. That's going to be, I think, key to getting our propositions passed in May, which I believe will happen. But one of the things, and I don't know that I can really answer that completely, I want to have some parent forums, and that was part of my plan in June, is to go to each of the high schools, have the feeder schools, invite all of them to come, the parents, and just have like a town hall meeting. Let me just sit and hear what you have to say. I think that would be very helpful, because the needs that the people that you serve are going to be different than the needs that they serve. And so I think that would help me have a more global sense of what the needs are, and then be able to address them as they are specific to each community.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Wiggins?
Good evening, Dr. Younger. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
All right. With fewer individuals entering the field of education for various reasons, they're just not there. What will you do to increase the number of minority teachers in our parish?
And that's a struggle. When I've been to the national conferences, we hear that same thing. In my former district, same thing. I think only about 11% of our teachers in Rapides were actually a minority. The biggest thing would be incentives to try to get them to go into education. And in all honesty, Mr. Wiggins, if I could answer that question, I'd be consulting somewhere and making big bucks flying all over the country, helping solve that problem, because it is an issue. But, the best thing I think we can do is have a good system here that attracts the best. And whether we offer, go and try to actively recruit at some of the HBCUs to be more active recruiting presence there, I think that would be a good thing. If we have those who are seeking alternative certification, maybe we could assist them in some way. But that really it's a very difficult question, and one that is definitely not unique to our district. But I do think it is important, because our teachers need to mirror as best they can the communities that they serve.
Second part of my question is, since we know that it is a difficult issue, is there any possibility of growing our own? In other words, we find kids that are interested in the 10th level or whatever in education, and encouraging them and hoping they'll come back.
Yes, sir. And we have at Bipstall, we have some of those courses, I can't remember what the name of it is, Early Start or something like that, for the students who are interested, to try to get them sort of hooked in the beginning. I've actually had, my daughter was in that class. She's hopefully going to be our 5th generation educator. So we at least have one that I know will be coming this way. But some of those things that we could do, maybe even encouraging our minority students to take those courses. It's a great, great place for them to get hooked into it. I had them also at my school who come in with the pre-K classes and work hard with that. I think, though, just having a good quality school system that attracts the best is the great thing we could do. One of the things that I would like to see us do long-term, I would not be able to implement it right now, but looking at long-term goals, I do want to do a grow your own program where we have, like you said, people who are interested, where we can have them come in, take our courses under our people so they learn the Bossier way of doing things.
Yes.
And then with that, if you go through our program, then you're committed to X number of years, whatever we feel comfortable with, so that you have them guaranteed for at least this amount of time. So hopefully that would keep them, hooked into our system. And then, if they leave early, then you're going to have to pay us for that because we have invested money and time in you. But hopefully they would, come in and stay and then be able to be productive long-term career teachers for us.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Ms. Darby?
Good evening, Dr. Younger. Thank you for interviewing for the superintendent position. My question is, there's a discussion about back to the basics. What's your philosophy on that topic, and how would you implement that?
I think it all starts with reading and math. And if they can't read and they can't do math when they leave the elementary school, then we've failed our students. The issue becomes when we are graded, how does the state grade us? They grade us on the core 4. So it's very, very difficult, I think, to say, because if I had my choice, like if the legislature came and said, what do you think? I think we focus strictly on math and reading, and until you get those down, you don't move forward. I really believe that if we don't do that, we have kids who are in middle school and in high school that can't do basic math and they can't read on grade level, but we continue to push them on. I think we're doing them a disservice. However, within the rules as they presently are, we don't have a whole lot of choice in that. But I really wish in the elementary schools we could focus strictly on math and reading. And then, because again, if you can read, I can learn about all of these other things. I am, though, a proponent of STEM. I think that's very, very important, especially within our area, as much technology and industry that we have here. We've got to have our students more involved in those types of programs. But I just kind of believe excuse English reading is where it's at. And I wish we could focus more time on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Bamberg?
Hey, Dr. Younger, thanks for coming out and interviewing this evening. My question is, change is necessary in today's educational system. Oftentimes, change has a direct effect on the morale of the ones that have to change. Entities outside of Bossier Parish have continually changed the landscape of the educational system that forced us to change. Sometimes those are minute and sometimes those are wholesale changes. What changes have you been personally responsible for that have affected your system in a positive manner while maintaining the morale of those affected?
I think the biggest thing when you get ready to change is to not use that word change, first of all, because that puts people kind of on the defensive to begin with. I think when you have to explain why. You don't just change for change's sake. There has to be some type of catalyst. If we're changing our reading program, then we say, you know what, for these number of years, it's not working for us. Therefore, this is something that we're going to try. I just think that it's all in how you present it to people. I'll use my school right now as an example. Schools typically that have struggled, it's new program, and you get very fatigued with that. And all you do is you sit there and you wait and you say, well, you know what? I'll just kind of go along with it because eventually something new and great will come along and this will go out and we'll package it up and send it in. We'll get this new program that'll come in and be here for 2 or 3 years till the state dangles another pot of money, and then we'll chase after that, and it's very, very frustrating. So I think, number one, you communicate why. Well, first of all, that would be my recommendation would be, why are you changing? If it's working now and we're getting good results, why are we changing it to begin with? But if you feel that that's what you have to do, then you would implement that. I would say one of the biggest changes that I was proud of, in HR, we did things like we streamlined our process. And that's tough because not only am I changing the way principals do it, the way the whole system does it, but then there was money involved. So you had to get finance department involved in that. So I felt like that was something that is very positive. Here at Central Park, though, the second week I was there, we rehauled the entire master schedule. And, I mean, those of you who've been in education know that that's no small feat to do in the middle of the school year. But we knew it wasn't working. We had to do something different. So I feel like when you communicate the why behind it, it makes that change a whole lot more palatable. And a lot of times in education, you don't really change it, as in throwing it all out and starting over. You tweak what you already have and you make it better. So I think when you get ready to implement change, you have to just be very careful to communicate the why and then make it palatable in small pieces that people will be successful with. Because if you give them something and just say, here, you figure it out, they're frustrated, you're frustrated, and it just doesn't work. So I think you divide it into smaller pieces that make it where they're successful, and then the change is much more palatable.
Thank you.
My first question is going to be Mr. Bullard's question.
Okay.
So you can imagine, if you know Mr. Bullard, it's kind of long. As a school leader, have you had to address problems associated with an underperforming school, populated with students from a depressed or lower socioeconomic background? And one, what changes did you implement to turn the performance around? And part two, what changes were successful and which were not?
That's actually what I was brought in to do here at Central Park. I already talked about overhauling the master schedule, and we had some good teachers, but they weren't necessarily in the places where they need to be. So at the end of the last school year, we all came in one by one and talked about where felt like they would be most successful, had very positive conversations. Also had to bring in some people and say, you know what, I know you love to teach, but this really probably is not the best place for you, because not everybody can teach everywhere. Just because maybe you're not successful at this school, there may be a different place for you to be. So we started that. We also did the RTI program, where we have the first hour of the day where our students come in. They're leveled out by their reading level. We decided as a staff to focus strictly on reading at this point. And that has been wildly successful. We've seen students move through the levels of the ERLA program, which is the reading program that we use, that is sort of a remedial program, and it addresses specific skills at each level that students have to pass in order to move to the next one, so that there are no gaps in their learning. And that has just been great. What's been interesting is that it's an all-hands-on-deck program. So our GASP para has her group, our assistant principal teaches a group. I'll go in if somebody's absent for a day and teach their group. So it's been, I think, probably the thing, if I were to look back on these last 14 months, is the thing I'm most proud of. And we've seen the most success because we've seen students grow. I was worried because we would have maybe a fifth grade student that's with a group that may be more of fourth or third grade, but because they were successful there, they loved it. They never once said, well, I don't want to be in there with those little kids, you know, or had any issues, but they felt success, and when they were successful, they began to improve in their attitudes, and they would move up to the next level. So that's probably the thing I'm most proud of in turning around the school. We are continuing to work on culture, because you all know it starts with the school culture. You've got to have a positive place for students to be and a place where parents feel welcome. So we're still working on that, and I would love for you to come see my school if you want to know the truth. Come and or talk to my teachers. I think there are a few here tonight, but I think they would echo the same thing, that we've changed the culture, and we've implemented lots of things like the RTI program. We've also become more strict with our discipline, because you can have a fabulous lesson and the best curriculum ever, but if the kids are acting up and you don't have classroom management, it's not going to work. So I would say those are the things that we've done in the time that I've been here. And again, it is an underperforming school. I'm not going to say low performing. I'm going to say underperforming, because we're moving up and we're going to meet our potential.
Now I'll ask my question. Teachers within Bossier Parish are reporting that they feel undervalued and their voice is excluded from decision-making discussions. Realizing that employee morale is a critical low right now, what are your plans for evaluating teachers' voice within Bossier Parish, including teachers in the decision-making process?
Sure. Well, I do know that we have committees that work on particular areas. For example, I've got teachers that are serving on this new reading committee. We've got some that are serving on the different areas. But I think it's important that the superintendent that the teachers have the ear of the superintendent as well. I think it would be important for me to be visible in the schools. I know one of my goals, which I saw in my previous superintendent, was he was in every school at least once a semester. And I would love to be able to do that, to go in, and because you can talk about a school, but when you walk in the door, you need to know what it feels like to be there. That's one way I think that you could talk to teachers, because when you walk in and it feels like an oppressive environment, well, you know, you kind of make some judgments about the morale there. I feel like, you know, I would be very approachable. I think my staff would tell you now I'm not scary, you know. I don't mind. I have an open door policy. With that, though, because of the demands on a single person's time, there are chains of command. However, if you feel like you're being harassed or there's something that's absolutely a red flag, my door is open and my phone and my email are available.
Thank you. Mr. Newman?
Good evening, Dr. Younger. Thanks for coming out and joining us today. We appreciate your dedication to our school system and education all the way around.
Thank you.
Going through your documents, you have a very diverse background in elementary. My question revolves more around our older students, in particular our Jumpstart, CTE, our vocational. As you know, we have a wonderful facility down the road in Bipstal. We have wonderful staff. I see Ms. Spiller's over here. With the focus that the state and the world is going right now, we still need people that can do the hands-on stuff. We still need people to fix my car, fix my air conditioner, things like that. Kind of give me your idea for a focus and plan revolving around those vocational skills and Jumpstart. As you know, it's a focus now, and it plays into the SBS scores and the district score almost as much as traditional learning does. So kind of tell me what you'd like to see there and what you would like for that.
Sure. Well, I definitely believe that not every student needs to go to college. It's just not, with the way student loans go now, I don't know that every student can afford to go to college. I mean, I've got friends that are my age, which has been out for a little while, they're still paying off student loans. And so I think that's one thing that scares people. But I did a little bit of research on that and actually printed out some of the things, the different offerings that are at Bipstal. And I loved what I saw because I saw a very wide variety. And then I kind of looked at that with what I did, the research that I did in terms of what the jobs are that are growing in our area. I would love to see us to be a lot more focused on the technology piece, not only being able to have students go into the technology jobs, but you've got to have somebody to wire those. So what are we doing with electrical, you know, and the conduits and all of that? I'm not a contractor, but I know they have conduits. But, you know, an outlet, you got to have an outlet. But, you know, what are all of those supporting pieces that go with it? Somebody's got to fix it when the screen stops working. Somebody's got to fix that. So I feel like we need to do a really good job of being responsive to our industry here, being able to supply that, because you and I both know that when industries get ready to locate to a company, they look at the school system. Can that school system support that? So I feel like you know, we have a lot of good things. You know, I've seen carpentry and automotive, lots of medical field things. I'd like to see us expand that more, since that's such a huge industry as well. But I would love to see, whenever businesses get ready to meet, that they say, okay, we're going to have, you know, here's General Dynamics and here's this one, and don't forget the school system. I want to see a marriage of that where you don't see any division between what they do and what we do, so that we can be responsive to their needs. If we don't, then when our kids get older, they move away because there's better jobs somewhere else. And I don't want to see that. And I feel like we have such a gift in Bipstal and what we're able to do there. And truly, you all have led the way in terms of being innovative with what you've done there compared to what I've seen in some other districts. So I'd love to work with Ms. Spillers and with the rest of the business community to be able to make sure that we're meeting their needs and providing the jobs and the training that our students need to be able to enter the workforce when they leave.
Thank you.
Mr. Backhaus?
Dr. Younger, very nice to meet you, and I'm very impressed, and I appreciate your attitude towards teaching youngsters to read early. And President Cheatham, Mr. Bullard's got nothing on me for tonight, so if you'll just bear with me on this question. I'm a proponent for counselors, and I really think they need to be available, but my question is, the American School Counseling Association has developed a national model that, when adopted by school systems, has shown to decrease bad behaviors on campus, increase test scores, and increase graduation rates. Among the recommendations in these guidelines, ASCA shows that counselors need to spend about 75% of their time directing services to see the best results. They also state there should be one counselor for every 250 students. Counselors in Bossier Parish hold the position of testing coordinator, which is a consuming position, time-consuming position for 2 months of the school year. And we have some elementary counselors alone with, as you probably know, 800 to 1,000 students on there. What is your stand on adopting these things that the ASCA national model presents?
Sure.
Do I need to repeat anything?
No,
That was
sir,
a long
I'm
question.
good. I took a
sorry.
few little notes. I think
I'm
I got
sorry.
it. 75% with students and 1 to 250.
Yes, ma'am.
Totally agree with that. I can tell you in the school that I serve right now, I could use 2 counselors, sometimes 3, because we have students now that are coming to us that have a lot more issues than maybe, when we were in school, and even when I first started my career in education, their needs are much, much greater. We're seeing a lot more students with mental illnesses and things like that. And, when I have, conversations with other principals, it's not unique to my school. As teachers and educators, we're not equipped to deal with that. I can help you when you've got ADHD and try to do some things like that, but when you have issues outside of that are greater than what I can handle, I need some help. And so I will tell you, my counselor, I'm not going to make any principal friends with this, but my counselor does not do testing. Her job is to work with the students, and I'm very firm in that. I don't feel like they ought to be they should not be a quasi-administrator on campus. Their job is to work with our students for their mental safety and stability. They have training that as teachers we don't. As educators, we're not equipped to handle some of the things that they deal with. So I definitely agree with that. I love the 1 to 250 students. It's a great model to adopt. However, our resources are finite, even though our needs are infinite. So I think we've got to do the best we can. I would like to see us resource students based on resource schools in that area based on the need. So if you've got a high percentage of students that have some significant needs, then maybe we need to make sure that you have an extra counselor. Whereas maybe a school that doesn't, you'll have your full-time and maybe one that kind of comes on a rotating basis. But those guidelines are fantastic, and I think in a perfect world, I'd love to see that because our students need it. But we do have to kind of then take that and weigh that with the resources that we have available.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Ms. Brotherson?
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming, and thank you for the interest you have in this position. Choosing the superintendent for Bossier Parish Schools is the most important decision that this board is going to be making this year. Having said that, communication between the superintendent and the school board members is very important. As the new superintendent, how would you keep us in the loop, and what steps would you take to ensure there is good communication between the board and the superintendent?
That's me, because at the end of the day, I really work well with you. I may serve all of the others, but I work with you with pleasure. I think things like weekly emails, here's what's going on. If there's something that's maybe happening in your district, give you a phone call. Here's what's going on, just so if a parent were to call you, you wouldn't be blindsided by that. If the administrator would have a concern. You have my cell number to be able to call me at any time that you have a question about something. I don't mind. I do feel like this is sort of like a doctor being on call all the time, because you never know what's going to happen. It could be 12 o'clock at night, something happens at one of your schools, and I need to be there. I would be as available as you need me to be. I think it's very important that I never bring something to a committee or something that I haven't talked to you about beforehand, kind of explain to me, it's all about communication and building that relationship. I would hope if you would choose me that we would be able to trust one another, that I wouldn't come to a board meeting and have something introduced at the first time. I would hope there would be the courtesy of, hey, this is what we're thinking, and we're going to bring out a committee. We'd like to review more prior to that. I have not been to a lot of board meetings. I can tell you at my other district that sometimes things are very contentious. I don't sense that here. The few meetings that I have attended have been very positive, and when you're out of here in less than an hour, I was just and even, at the last board meeting, there were some questions but it was so respectful. And I love the climate, and I would love to continue to have that relationship and be able to contribute, if you guys, well, what are we doing about this? To be able to say, maybe right now, I don't know, let me find out and talk to the people in charge of that, and I'll get back right after we have people. I think I'm a good people person, and would be available to be able to do whatever you need to do, answer your questions. You would never be blindsided by it.
Mr. Dean?
Dr. Younger, thank you for your preparation. My question is, as a school district, we can spend a lot of money on different programs and have the very best equipment. In my opinion, I think extra morale is very important to test your students. What would you do as superintendent to help with extra morale?
There's a lot of things. First of all, making sure that it's just a positive place to be. And I think we do that by having positive media attention that we have, focusing on those good things. I think, like I said earlier, you have to keep in front of people why did you go into this? So when they remember, okay, because I love kids, I want to see kids grow, and I want to you get up every day wanting to do the best that you can be. I think that whole thing, success breeds success. I feel like allowing them to have the voice that we talked about in one of the other questions, where they know that I really do care. I do care what you think and what your opinions are. I think too, though, even though because there is that sort of a ravine between the superintendent and the teacher, it's also now in your literature is making sure that you attend to their oh gosh, what's the word? This is where my nerves are. Making sure that their mental health also is taken care of, that they feel appreciated. We do a lot of things on our staff. I hope you didn't see this online, but I'll put on a little Grinch hat and a Starbucks apron, and we'll go around with hot chocolate or things like that. Just those little things. It's 50-cent corn dog day at Sonic, where you say, hey, here's your corn dog, and just those little things that say, you know what, I care about you. I think those are important things that you do just to let the teachers know that they care. Encouraging principals to do those same things, because those little things mean a whole lot. I think it also comes about that when you have opportunities to celebrate their successes. I love what this board does in terms of intentional recognition of what they have accomplished. So I think those things are important in encouraging and equipping other teachers to be successful as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith?
Good evening, Dr. Younger. Thank you for sharing your passion and why you're in education with us. My question is, what would you consider Bossier Parish School Board's two biggest challenges in each of the following categories? Students, employees, administrators, curriculum, and for our board itself. And what skills or strengths do you possess to impact these challenges?
All right, give me that list again, please, ma'am.
Students, employees, administrators, curriculum, and the board itself.
Okay. I think for students, the one thing that I see is motivation, keeping them motivated. This time in the year, it gets tough because they see the end is in sight. You get spring fever, we've got testing coming up, so I think keeping students motivated. I know that we've done a whole lot of PD at our school on keeping students motivated. So I would say that would be the biggest goal, biggest challenge there. For employees, I think it's almost the same thing of doing everything right every single day. There's not a day that you can just not, come to work and just kind of say, I'm not feeling it today, because you've got children that are depending on you. For administrators, I think it's keeping them current with the best practices. I will tell you that if I am selected for this position, we will have a lot more professional development that's centered around leadership to equip our administrators to continue to be instructional leaders and not just managers. In terms of curriculum, I think the biggest challenge is what one of the other questions had to do with that it keeps changing. And so we need to, if the curriculum changes, I've got to have people on board that can support that change, because nothing is worse than telling we're changing and I don't know how it's going to work, you figure it out. So when we change curriculum, and I know we've just gone through that and we'll be going through it again, making sure that we have the supports in place to make that happen. In terms of the board, I think it's staying grounded in what the current policies are, and just as things change, being able to lead that change, and making sure that, again, that we have good relationships with each other, and that we just continue to stay in contact and to be positive and bring forth, you also speak not only for the students but for the teachers in your districts as well. I'm sure just like the rest of us, you don't go anywhere without somebody saying, oh, hey, oh, by the way, do you mind if I talk to you about this for just a minute? And you get an earful. So, communicating that with me, I think it would be crucial. And I feel like if we can take care of those challenges, that we'll be able to move the district forward. What was the last question that you said, Part
What
B?
specific skills or strengths do you possess to impact these challenges?
I think having the different experiences that I've been in terms of being in a Title I school, being in a rural, an urban school, being in schools that are racially diverse, an academic magnet school, I've really been in it all. There's not a situation that I can think of in this district that I would not be able to address because of the experiences that I've had up to this point. I feel like not only that, I'm able to help our administrators do what they need to do with the personnel they have on board in order to be successful, whether it's helping them to move the teacher to the right grade level, or maybe finding the right people, or even sometimes you think you want to be a teacher, and when you get in there it's not what you thought it would be, and it's okay to sometimes bow out gracefully. So I feel like I could really contribute to that. I feel like my leadership experience in a different school system where I've seen some things done a little differently, I think would serve me well also, because sometimes when you've only been in one situation, you tend to have this very narrow, myopic view. And so I feel like I've had a variety of experiences that I would be able to draw from in order to be able to move our district forward. Thank you.
Our next two questions will be asked by Ms. Sonia Bales, and they are questions that come from the public from our BozierSchools.org website.
I wondered where you were. I never did see you.
And we have been soliciting the public for the past week questions to ask of each of our applicants. So I'm going to ask you two that came from our public. We had 74 submitted altogether. The first question being, where do you see opportunities for innovation within our parish?
Well, I really think we covered that in Mr. Newman's question. I feel like being more responsive to industries and their needs, I feel like we can be very innovative there. I also would like to be innovative and aggressive when we look at recruiting and retaining teachers. One of the things that I had begun working on and didn't quite get to develop because, we moved up here was when you go out to recruit, and I'm telling you 100%, I'm believing we're going to get that proposition in May. That will put us in a great position. But not only that, when somebody's moving and relocating to a new area, they have things like deposits, whether it's an apartment or phone and rent and cable bills and all those things. I'd love to have a package that we can present at a job fair that says, come to Bossier, we want you here, our community loves you, so we have some special incentives for you to come. We'll either defer or maybe just waive your deposit on these apartments that'll come. Our utility company values education, and so they're going to defer your deposits for now, because how can you pay a deposit on something when you're not even getting a check yet? So I would really like to be innovative in terms of our recruitment, because I do believe that's probably one of the biggest areas that we have got to do something differently in. The number of graduates is very small, and we've got a large geographical area that are competing for that same group of students. So I feel like if we could do some things being very innovative with that, that's going to put us in a really great position. So I feel like doing that and then continuing to develop the programs at Vipstal in order to meet the needs of the current industries and businesses that are in our area will really allow us to be a true light in this area.
Second question, how do you ensure the playing field is the same for those principals, teachers, students, et cetera, in Title I schools versus those not in Title I schools?
That is a great question. Well, first of all, through our Title I funding, of course, with ESSA, you know, those schools are given extra financial resources to use as they see fit in order to move their students forward. I do feel like that personnel-wise, we need to have some additional hands on deck. Going back to Mr. Bachhaus's question about the counselors, there are greater needs in Title I schools because of the backgrounds from which our students come. We really do need to be resourced greater there. I can tell you from my personal experience now, I wish I had another administrator because the needs are great and there's lots to do, but our time is sometimes taken up with discipline or taken up with other things that we really could use an extra set of hands. I'd love to do something innovative with that, with something almost like an administrator in training type program. So it's not a full assistant principalship, but it's more like an extra assistant. Some have them and some don't. I don't know why that's not uniform, and that was not my decision, but that's something I would definitely do because I do feel like those schools need some extra hands on deck. I would also like to see in those schools, assuming the resources financially are available, to have some specific coaches. I know we have just one coach, but I think you really need one that's for reading and one that's for math because the curriculum is different in each. The approaches are different, and those teachers could not only teach teachers, but then they could also be RTI, remediation and or enrichment for those students when they are not teaching teachers. So I feel like that's a place where we could be, that would really help level the playing field.
Thank you, Dr. Younger.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll give you your 5 minutes for your closing statements.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much. I've enjoyed your questions. You've definitely made me think, and I hope I've provided you with some information that as you go forth and make your decision tomorrow evening that you'll make the best decision for our school district. I just want to kind of go over a few things, the reasons why I believe that I would be a great superintendent for Bossier Parish. First of all, I'm prepared to lead based on not only my educational experiences, but also my experiences in the classroom and the experiences at central office to be able to come in and pick up the reins and take off and lead this district. My experiences are so varied because I've been in the A school and I've been in the D school and I've been in everywhere in between. And I feel like that is very crucial because I can talk to teachers and parents and administrators in a high-performing school just like I can encourage and talk to those that are in schools that are underperforming. I've had district-level experience in the most, what I feel truly is the most crucial point in a school system, and that's director and being able to work with human resources because, again, you really learn the policies, you learn how to manage people in those positions, and you've got to be able to be a good people person in order to be a good superintendent. I feel like my leadership in another district is something that I can bring here, so I've seen some different things that have been taking place and ways that we could improve. I feel like because normally when one is on their career path, they don't go to a district level and then come back to a principalship. I think that was really unique, though. And what that has allowed me to do is, and I understand from a district level the why, because I've been there where you're looking at everything, and then to come back to the principalship and say, that looks really good when you're sitting up there at that position, but now in practice, what does that look like, and how does that really impact a school on a day-to-day basis? So that's been a really, I think, a neat aspect or a neat perspective that I could bring, and I would still be, because I've been so close to it, I would be a great voice for both teachers and principals in the superintendent's office. I didn't mention it till now, but I'm also in that Louisiana Superintendent's Academy, and that has been an amazing journey. It's been, I have my last classes coming up this weekend, and we have made contacts all across the state that will serve me well. We've been sitting at the table with national and state leaders and everything from finance to personnel to even just board politics. So I feel like that's been a great asset that I would bring because everything we're doing is current happening right now. the ability that I've had, or the opportunities that I've had to present at state and national conferences has really prepared me to be able to stand up in front of groups of people and speak. I don't have any problem getting up in front of Rotary and saying, here's what we've been doing, we want your support, or going and talking to groups on behalf of our school system and on behalf of the board and saying, here's what we're doing, come and join us. So I feel like I do a great job with that. I have a potential for longevity here. I'm not at the end of my career. I hope I don't look like I am. And so, this is something that's not something that I'm doing on my way out. This is where I want to be for the next 16 years. So, I would hope we would have a great relationship and be able to just grow together and watch what the district does. I feel like I also would be a good voice for the elementary teachers and administrators, and that's maybe a voice that has not always been very strong in the upper administrative levels of the system. I'm really big on accountability. So, you know what, if you are in this position, and you're making this salary, I need to see at least that much work out of you. So within what I would plan to do, there'd be high levels of accountability throughout the system, and I would expect that you would hold me accountable as well to do the job that you are asking me to do. And then I'll close with this: everything I do it with a spirit of excellence. I'm not going to halfway do anything. Learned from very early on, if it's worth doing right. And I just believe I'm ready to take on this challenge. I'd love to work with you. I would love for us to move this district forward, and I hope that I get the chance to do that. So thank you so much for your attention and your questions, and I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Younger, thank you very much for your time today and how prepared you were and your answers. And most of all, thank you for what you do for our Bossier Parish kids now and in the future. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll take a 5-minute break for the board members just to get some water, go to the bathroom, and then we'll get started.
This is extra currency.
Sorry.
At this time, we would like for the applicant, the second applicant, and the second interview for the day, Mr. Mitchell A. Downey. Good afternoon. Mr. Downey, we'll start with a 5-minute introduction by yourself. Then after that, we will, each board member, starting with Mr. Slack, will ask you one question, followed by Sonia Bales, who will ask you 2 questions from our Bossier Schools website, and then you'll have an opportunity for a 5-minute closing once that's complete.
Thank you. Well, a little bit about me. I was born here. I went to Meadowview Elementary in 1st grade. My father was in the Air Force, and so we moved around a good bit. I then attended Cary Martin in the 5th grade and graduated from Parkway High School. Since that time, my mother has enjoyed a 20-year career as called them teacher's aides, now we call them paras, over at Ingersoll Elementary in Shreveport. And my dad had a 21-year career in the Air Force. My wife and I have 4 children. They all graduated from Bossier Schools. We have 8 grandchildren that we've been blessed with. 6 of those either are attending or will attend Bossier Schools. And I've been blessed with a 34-year career in the same parish, which is Bossier Parish. I was thinking about it yesterday, I've held 8 different positions at 5 different sites or schools over the years. My wife thinks I can't keep a job. But I've enjoyed my experience and my time in Bossier Parish. I've been several different things. I was a teacher, a coach, an athletic coordinator, administrative assistant, assistant principal, principal, assistant superintendent, and interim superintendent. And I'm very, very proud of my body of work, my track record, so to speak. All along the way at all those different sites, I've been able to establish positive relationships based on mutual respect, with students and teachers and staff alike. I think I'm known for common sense and fairness and equity, with also having a high expectations at the same time. I think my strengths are that I know the landscape of Bossier Parish, I know the stakeholders, I know what the community values are, and I have strong relationships with our community partners, and those have always been positive. I know that we have faced some challenging times, and we're also continuing to go through turbulent waters. that we have to try to figure out how to navigate. I think it's vitally important to have a stable, confident, and capable leadership to direct us through these challenges. Bossier Parish has a long history of excellence in schools and success, and it started way before I showed up. But because of that history of excellence and success, I think that there are some things that we need to weed and trim, but I don't believe we need to pull everything up by the roots, as some would suggest. I think that my leadership would be solidly based on collaboration. I think there's value in partnerships with our teachers and staff. I think that individuals have good ideas, but teams have great ideas. And we have a great need in our parish to value our teachers, to give them a seat at the table, to involve them, support them, recognize them, and value them. I also think that our principals need support, and we must recognize that they are the main determinant of a school's culture. Our employees all, as we all believe, deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And I think teacher efficacy, which is teacher confidence, is the single most determining factor in the success of a child in a classroom, and we need to continue to stay focused on that. I believe that every decision we make should be based on what is best for students, and if we do that, we can't go wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. All right, Mr. Slack, you're up first.
Thank you. Mr. Downey, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for a long time, not very close, but I watched your success at Benton High School as a football coach. I'm kind of an ex-athlete, and I specialize in football, I guess, because that's the only sport I was able to do. So anyway, I watched you with a good bit of eagerness, and the way you handled yourself. And since you've gone beyond that and you've gone into administration, I think you were down at Power Parkway a couple of years, or however many it was. And then you were promoted to the superintendent's administrative assistant. And I enjoyed the job you've done. Thank you for that. And I appreciate your willingness to serve as a superintendent. And I only have, I'm going to have the shortest question you'll be asked tonight. During your time as a school administrator, what was your proudest achievement? Number two is, what was your greatest failure?
Well, I think I'm my own worst critic, and I always have been. But I think one of my proudest achievements as a school administrator was being able to interact and work with difficult students, encourage them to make the right choices. We had a young lady at the high school where I was a principal that was difficult at times. I was able to establish a relationship with her, and for her senior project, she invited me to her presentation where she brought in a nationally known speaker to talk about human trafficking. I actually went down there a week early because I didn't check my calendar, and I was turned around and came back the next week because I'd made that commitment to her, and watched her do her presentation and was in awe of the passion and detail that she put into what she was doing. And so I would say that just being able to work with difficult students and encourage them to be successful is probably my proudest accomplishment as an administrator. My greatest failure is probably early in my career. not learning how to delegate well enough, and trying to do a lot on my own, which I wasn't very successful at, and hopefully I've learned from my own mistakes. Got a few scars to show for it, and I've tried to be better about that, but I've learned to trust people, and sometimes our greatest failures are our greatest lessons. So I hope I answered your question.
Thank you.
Mr. Mercer?
Thank you. Mr. Downey, it's been a privilege to know you for, I've sort of lost count, maybe 16 or 17 years now, and just to thank you for what you've done for us so far, filling a void, waiting for this process to take place. My question is really simple. We've watched as presidents have been elected to office and given a 100-day, say, grace period, a period where they can set an agenda or a goal or a vision for the United States or their country. In this capacity, what would your plan be to address maybe some controversy or issues we're dealing with, but more or less, what is your first 100-day plan?
I think I worked on my 100-day plan 34 years ago when I started, and that was creating relationships. And but to answer your question, because I do know people and I do have positive relationships, the first thing I would do was encourage our teachers that we're going to support them and we're going to do everything we can to provide them the highest quality professional development. Not that we're not already doing that, but I think there's some things we can do to empower them and to give them ownership and for them to know that they're valued. That would be my first priority.
Mr. Wiggins?
Mr. Downey, good evening. I'm going to revert for a minute to my former status as radio announcer. So I'll say first, Mitchell A. Downey, a man indeed, checking you out to see if you're the one we need. We're interviewing from sun to sun. Question is you the one? Now, the real question is this. We're few individuals entering the field of education. We know that's very true, unfortunately. What really can you do to increase the number of minority teachers in our parish?
Just stated simply, I think we have to increase our efforts to recruit. Nationwide, the number of people going into education is down about 80% over the last 20 or 30 years. And so we have to compete for a smaller and smaller pool of applicants, and we want only the best in Bossier Parish. So in order to do that, we're going to have to outcompete the people that are also trying to do the same thing in other parishes. If that means more resources, if that means more time, if that means more manpower, then that's what we have to do, because they're our future and they have the greatest single impact on a child's life. We want to make sure that we do everything we can. And so to answer your question, I think we need to go back and we need to look and make sure if we're doing everything possible that we can to attract the brightest and the best.
Appreciate that. Do you think there's a possibility we can, as some said, grow our own? In other words, we find individuals in our system that are in school that may be leaning towards that career, that we can encourage them and groom them, and hopefully they'll come back to us if they decide to do that.
Well, we currently have our scholarship program that focuses on those that are, some that are going into education as a career, and we've had several students that have come back and serve the role as a teacher. But certainly we can always continue to strengthen what we're doing and look at other options. I think that, I've always said if what you did yesterday still looks big to you, then you probably hadn't done much today. So we always want to continue to try to improve on what we're doing, and that is definitely an area that we need to focus on.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Just smile and make this fun. The question still is you the one? Thank you.
I'm just glad I'm out of that room upstairs.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Ms. Darby?
Good evening, Mr. Downing.
Ms. Darby.
One question. There's a discussion about back-to-school basics. What is your philosophy on this topic?
Well, I think there's a balance there. Obviously, we have to respond to mandates from the state, and we have to be able to, for our students to compete globally. And so for us to continue to provide the highest quality education we can't separate ourselves from the rest of the world. And so for us to not recognize the needs to create a strong workforce and workforce opportunities, and just say that we're just gonna be Bossier Parish and we're gonna teach our own curriculum, I don't think is reasonable. But I do think that there's a balance that we can strike as far as communicating some of these difficult curriculums. Math comes to mind. Have town hall meetings, do different types of instructional programs to help some of these parents and some of these community members understand the direction we're going. We can always do a better job at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Bamberg?
Mr. Downey goes by many names. Staff, interim, acting. So anyway, thanks for coming tonight. And I have a question that deals with change. Little background, change is necessary in today's educational system. Oftentimes change has a direct effect on the morale of the ones that have to change. Unfortunately, entities outside of Bossier schools have continually changed the landscape of the educational system that force us to make changes in our own system. Sometimes those are minute changes, and other times wholesale changes. What changes have you personally been responsible for that have affected your system in a positive manner while maintaining the morale of those affected? Not infected, affected.
Well, I'll start. When I was a principal at a high school, we enacted the ACT prep program that to try to give our students a leg up. It was a bold move on our part, and I think the staff believed in me and what I thought we should do, and it was an epic failure because I asked people to do things they weren't capable of. And so the next year we came back and we evaluated it and modified it, and we were much more successful giving people areas of responsibility that fit their strength or their skill set. And so I guess that's two responses there is the change that we implemented at that time was ultimately successful, but after a period of time where we had to come back and reevaluate and modify it. As far as what I've done in the role I'm in now as assistant superintendent, we've done some things athletically with athletic coordinators that I think have helped schools and administrators provide more coverage to extracurricular events. We've done some things with helmets recertification to provide accountability and liability coverage. We've done some things with the AEDs, well, the board has, as far as placing those in all of our schools, elementary, middle, and high. So those are some things that we've done. I think we're more collaborative with our people in terms of our principals. I know there's a great mutual respect between myself and them as far as things that we need to look at in the future. But as far as change goes, I think it's more difficult for adults, and I think you have to be intentional and deliberate and very, very thorough about what you set up to provide them the resources they need to be able to change. And so those conversations need to take place, and they need to be in depth, and they need to be thorough, and we need to make sure that we have a great plan about how to introduce, communicate, and effectively train people when we do have to implement change.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Downey, Mr. Bullard was not able to make it tonight. He's ill, but hopes to be here tomorrow night. So I want to do my best, Mr. Bullard voice here, and ask you Mr. Bullard's question. He's listening and watching this live on YouTube. But his question is, as a school leader, have you had to address problems associated with an underperforming school, populated with students from a depressed or lower socioeconomic background? And number one, what changes did you implement to turn the performance around? And two, what changes were successful and which were not?
We do have challenges in our system with some of our Title I schools, and some of the challenges they face go anywhere from discipline to having difficulty recruiting teachers as well as substitutes to some of those sites. I've actually got a school visit set up for Friday for one of our principals and myself to go visit a school in Ouachita Parish that has the same type of challenges with the community that they serve, and they've had tremendous success. We're going to visit there on Friday, and the principal has even agreed to come visit our school here to observe and give feedback as far as what we could do to improve the situation. But those challenges continue. I think at some point in time in the future, we're going to have conversations about what we can do as far as resources to help with those challenges that I've already mentioned. And I think that's going to be a decision that the board can get on board with and help support. As far as positive changes, different scheduling strategies, decreasing transitions, trying to support teachers and support the staff at the school when we had behaviors that were over the top, and the students were just totally non-compliant, have to be able to try to get their attention, and sometimes it's even sad to say remove them from that situation so the ones that are there and want to learn can learn. And so there's a balance between trying to provide everyone with an opportunity and hope that they will take advantage, and so that we can support the staff. We have to remove the students that are non-compliant and put them in a location where they can't disrupt that particular campus. As far as things that haven't worked, I think that anytime you go into a situation where you're trying to impact a learning environment that has major challenges, there are some things that you're going to do, they're going to have positive results, and there's some things that you're going to try that you're going to have to come back and reassess what you've done and either double down on your efforts or go a different route. I don't think it's an exact science. I think that it takes a group of people to come up with the best solution and then tweak and modify that solution as you go. But those continue to be concerns. We have our Title I schools, all of our schools, we have subgroups that have been identified: English language learners, special education students, economically disadvantaged students, African Americans. All those subgroups are being tracked now, and if they're underperforming, then each of those schools that have a group that's been identified that's underperforming gets a designation which is either comprehensive intervention required or urgent intervention required. And so there's more and more focus on those individual subgroups and trying to make sure that we provide the resources needed to help them be successful.
Thank you, sir. Now I'll ask my question. Teachers within Bossier Parish are reporting that they feel undervalued and their voice is excluded from decision-making discussions. Realizing that employee morale is at a critical low right now, what are your plans for elevating teachers' voice within Bossier Parish and including teachers in the decision-making process?
Well, I think teacher morale is my number one priority, which I've already talked about in detail. I recognize that. Other members of our school family recognize that. It's critical that's the first thing that we address. We have to value them. I go into schools and I observe principals and visit classrooms, and I'm amazed at the passion and ability of the teachers that we have. And we need to make sure, they're the ones doing the heavy lifting. We need to make sure that we value them, we hold them up, we celebrate their successes, we give them the resources, the training that they need. Our schools, the history of our school system is dependent upon that. And I'm adamantly passionate about that.
Thank you. Mr. Newman?
Good evening, Mr. Downey. Thank you for your dedication to our parish and the time that you've put in, and hope to continue to have you around for a while.
Thank you.
My question focuses more towards the non-traditional students in vocational, and our older students in the vocational, Jumpstart, CTE, career pathways. It was best put that not everybody's going to college. We still need people to fix my car and my air conditioner, and your car and your air conditioner, and everybody the hands-on skills, the ones that are not really taught in the traditional classroom at the university level, but the ones that are often taught in the garage or, things like that. So what is your focus and plan for or what would be your focus and plan for our Jumpstart CT vocational student cross-section?
Well, I think that's a very important question that we all have to work to try to resolve. I met with Ms. Spillers about a week ago, and we talked about career technical education and expanding that program and trying to expand the access to BIPSTL with either a 5th or 6th block, so that these students that are heavily involved in these other endeavors also have an opportunity to take advantage of that incredible facility and a lot of things that they've got going out there. We've got an instrumentation program that we're about to bring online with a community partner that will attract additional students to the career technical education field. I think I talked with our principals about a week ago about the percentages of students that they had in their 11th and 12th grade cohort group that were in career technical education, and the approximate average is about 25%, depending on what school you're talking about. So it is a very large portion of our student body, and we have to get it right. Jumpstart continues to expand from the state. Other pathways are being added, and for lack of a better analogy, the problem with Jumpstart is that we're flying that plane while we're building it. And so we have to continue to adjust and adapt and try to react to what's coming from the state. But those careers, opportunities in CTE are invaluable to those groups of students, and we need to put as much emphasis and focus on expanding those programs and opportunities as we can. The resources are going to have to be increased. We're going to have to pay more attention to potentially a director of career technical education, which we did have in the past and we've eliminated. But I think the need and the complexity of those pathways requires that. We have several of our high schools that have Jumpstart counselors that their sole responsibility is focused on that group of students and making sure that those students get the IBCs, which are industry-based certifications that they need in order to qualify for a diploma. But that's a continuing conversation that we need to continue to allow to evolve and put the resources necessary on that we have into that. I think that 10 years from now, Jumpstart will be 10 times bigger than it is right now. I think that we have the potential with BIPSTL to make it 3 or 4 times bigger than it is right now. I can envision night classes, afternoon classes, all those opportunities that are out there as far as that facility is concerned. The relationships that Ms. Spillers has been able to create with our community partners in industry and the apprenticeship programs that she's currently implementing. All of those are going to be valuable options for our students to go into those professions that are highly sought after and very noble professions.
Thank you.
Mr. Buckhouse?
Thank you. Hope members of the audience will bear with me one more time, Coach. I'll read as fast as I can. The American School Counseling Association has developed a national model that, when adopted by school system, has shown to decrease behaviors on campus, increase test scores, and increase graduation rates. Among the recommendations in these guidelines, ASCA shows that counselors need to spend about 75% of their time in direct counseling services to see the best results. They also state there should be one counselor for every 250 students. Counselors in Bossier Parish hold the position of testing coordinator, which is an all-consuming position for 2 months of the school year. We have elementary counselors alone with 800 to 1,000 students. What is your stand on adopting the ASCA national model?
Can you repeat that question?
Here.
No, I understand.
Pass this down.
The first thing that I would say in response to that is that we have to evolve with the times. 25 years ago, our counselors in schools were academic counselors. Because of societal changes and needs, they're more focused now, and they need to be more focused now, on social emotional health. We have a mental health department that provides support to those schools with school psychologists and social workers and crisis interventions teams to try to help those counselors. As far as test coordinators are concerned, the high schools have solved that problem because that's what they use the instructional coach for. As far as the instructional coach goes, we've gotten to the situation where instructional coaches are overwhelmed and all they do is testing. And so they can't be a master teacher like they were intended to be. But as far as the question about what we do in terms of providing the help that those students need and the American School Counselors Association suggests, I think that's something that is continuing to evolve. I think most of y'all were at the Jamie Vollmer presentation, and you know the bottom line was that we're tasked with dozens and dozens of responsibilities that we didn't have decades ago, and social emotional health is one of those. And I think that I've spoke with Ms. Holly recently about that very issue, and I think we need to have those conversations and that dialogue and make sure that we're doing everything we can do. I think the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. Resources cost money, and money comes from our funds, and it has to be prioritized. And so if a group of people get together and determine that needs to be the priority, then we need to move in that direction. But we also, and I believe that would be the case because social emotional health is one of our greatest priorities. I think that we also have had conversations with our counselors about spending those quality minutes with those students, and whether it be small groups or presentations to address some of the concerns and needs that group of people are talking about, and they're all very valid. And I think that in my last decade or so, I've seen a shift in terms of counselors' awareness and focus towards those areas that you spoke about. But that is a continuing, evolving issue that we need to continue to focus on and make sure that we're doing our dead level best to do the best job we can with that possible. We do have outside providers that we've brought in to help us with some of those more not just over. Continue doing what I've been doing for the last couple of months, and I think that
Mr. Dean? Mr. Downing, I want to thank you for all you've done for Bossier Schools and all that you're doing for Bossier Schools. And as a school district, we can spend lots of money on different programs and have the very best equipment. But in my opinion, I think teacher morale is very important for the success of teachers' students. What would you do as a superintendent to help boost teacher morale?
Well, I think that's been a common theme during our entire conversation here tonight. I think obviously that's my primary focus. I thought about visiting schools and talking to teachers and reassuring them. I know several of them. I don't think you can be around as long as I've been and not know people pretty well and the issues. I think they're very frank and honest with me. And I think just being available, being approachable, doing things to provide them with opportunities for input and dialogue is critical. But, we have to retain our teachers. We have to encourage them. Anything that I can do, if I'm given an opportunity to continue this job, that will be my number one priority, is making sure our teachers know they're valued and giving them a voice and a seat at the table.
Ms. Smith?
And Mr. Downing, and thank you for your 34 years of service and commitment to Bossier Schools. This is a long one. So, what would you consider Bossier Parish Schools' two biggest challenges in each of these categories? Students, employees, administrators, curriculum, and this board. And what skills or strengths do you possess to impact those challenges?
Students, employees, administrators, curriculum
and this board.
and the board. Two biggest challenges, and
For each of those categories, and then what strengths do you possess to impact those challenges?
well, as far as students are concerned, and this is my own personal opinion based on my experience, social media and how to deal with that properly. We've been tasked by the legislature to teach internet ethics or something to that. I don't know if that's the correct name, but we do that. Obviously, we have to do a better job of that because we continue to have students that make mistakes with social media and do things that could impact them and their future far beyond that one moment in time where they hit send or whatever the option is. But I think social media and probably career pathways are two challenges for students at this point in time. I think it's going to just continue to evolve and get more complicated. So we have to educate them and make them aware of what their options are. Right now with Jumpstart, they can almost wait until they're a junior before they make that decision about which one of those pathways they're going to go, whether it be Jumpstart or the university pathway. I can see a time when that decision will have to be made even sooner. And so we're going to have to do a better job of educating them and giving them the information as well as their parents so that they're very much aware of what their options are. As far as employees, are you talking about teachers or every employee? Well, I think the greatest challenge for our employees is to make a livable wage that they can provide for their families for. And I think the board has taken steps to try to address that issue, along with, providing them opportunities for advancement and encouragement. I think that the greatest determinant of someone's satisfaction with their job is if they feel valued. And I think that's a key to every position in our system. We tout the fact that we're a family and we need to make sure that we're taking care of everybody and treating them with dignity and respect, because that's just the right thing to do. But having a voice is powerful for teachers, it's powerful for students, it's powerful for everybody that we employ. And so I think we just extend our efforts that we're involved in as far as our teachers are concerned to all of our people. Insurance, benefits, retirement, all those things that we're tasked with by the state are important to people's futures and their lives. Our administrators, I think that our administrators have to feel like they're supported. I said earlier that our administrators at our school sites are the single most important determinant of a school's culture. How the staff treats the students, how the front office people greet the community when they come in, how they interact with parents. All of that starts and ends with the principals. Our assistant principals are the ones that are dealing with the difficult issues, the discipline issues. And so we have to support them and guide them and give them good advice. And I think that myself and the other employees that have been helping me, Ms. McCauley, Ms. Williams, and Ms. Poole, over the last couple of months, have given invaluable advice to those assistant principals as far as dealing with difficult situations. As far as the challenges for curriculum, I think that rolling out these state mandated programs, selecting tier 1 curriculum, which is our only option. We want to use the best and most valuable curriculum that we can. We have to ensure that what's written is what we're teaching and it's what's being tested, that they all align. The challenge and the hurdle is for it to be
provided with teacher input, and we do it in a manner that is more acceptable and embraced by the teachers. So curriculum has a very difficult job. We've seen a lot of changes in the last few years that have made their job even harder. And so to support that group is vitally important as well. The board challenges that the board is going to have to deal with: parish growth, our school system's growth, school facility equity across the parish. What do we do to attract and retain our teachers? How do we communicate effectively in a positive manner with our community partners and our stakeholders? All of those are challenges for the board, and I think that if we all work together and we have those conversations and work to try to communicate effectively, we can address all of those needs. Did I miss anybody?
No, you got them all. What skills do you possess to impact this?
Communication, mutual respect, the ability to listen, common sense, having conversations where people feel like you're empathetic and you understand their concerns, you're listening to what their needs are. I think that's my greatest attribute. Yes, ma'am.
At this time, Mr. Downing, Sonia Bales will ask you 2 questions that were submitted from the BosherSchools.org website.
Good evening, Mr. Downing. For the last week, we have asked our public to submit questions that would be asked of all 6 of our applicants. And of course, community engagement, very valuable to both the schools. So we would want to thank our public for submitting the questions. We had 74 in all that were submitted. Our first question for you from the public is, where do you see opportunities for innovation within Bossier Schools?
Well, I think that technology is going to continue to evolve. As far as where I see opportunities at the current time, I think it ties into the need for us to have a quality teacher in every classroom and provide the same programs at every school, no matter the location or the population in terms of number. And I think that blended learning or distance learning is going to be vital and key for us to be able to provide the same quality opportunities at every school as in the future. I think that I'll give you an example. Plaindale High School, because of their very small population, they don't have the same programs that Airline High School, Benton High School, Parkway High School, Halton High School have. And so if we have a calculus teacher there or a physics teacher there that can do online learning, videotape the lessons, and have a proctor in that classroom for those students that are interested in those subject or content areas at Plaindale High School, then we've made progress as far as that goes. Technology is a tool, and the way that we use it, we need to make sure that we're providing the greatest opportunity possible for all of our students. And that's why we have a fabulous technology supervisor that I talk to regularly about those challenges and about what his ideas are.
The second question is, how do you ensure the playing field is the same for those principals, teachers, and students in Title I schools versus those not in Title I schools?
Well, I think that goes back to the conversation we had earlier about the challenges that we have in Title I schools. We do have a Title I budget that the principal is involved in determining how that money is spent, the resources that are brought into those schools. That money is used to supplement, not supplant, the funds that are already allocated to that school. And so I think we have made some progress as far as devices in those schools, and there's a lot of those schools that have a 1-to-1 ratio as far as a student to device, but those schools continue and will continue to be challenges, and to make sure that the playing field is level, is we have to commit more resources to those schools. The challenges that I talked about with the particular school that we have as far as high quality teachers, wanting to go there, as far as substitutes, wanting to go to that specific location. I think we have to have a conversation about stipends to attract the best and the brightest to those schools that have those issues. And I think that we have a lot of other parishes. I've been fortunate in the last couple months to talk to superintendents in other parishes and pick their brain about what they're doing to address some of the same needs that we have. And that's been one of the conversations. And there are a lot of parishes that have similar issues that provide those stipends to teachers above what maybe some other teachers at other locations are getting. I think that's something that we have to have a conversation about. What we're doing now, I was actually at a presentation made by John White a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about that very thing. How do you attract your highest quality teachers at those economically disadvantaged schools? And everybody wants to be at a school that's an A school, that's high performing. So what do you have to do to change that conversation so that the best and the brightest want to go to those difficult schools and make a difference? And I think I think we start with talking about a stipend.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Downey, you can now do your closing statement.
Hopefully I've answered your questions thoroughly. If I haven't, then I apologize for that. But I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to compete for this position. I've enjoyed working with all of you over the last couple of months, and I hope to continue that relationship. I believe in order to have a substantially positive impact on an organization, you have to care about the outcome. And I care deeply about Bossier Schools based on my 34-year commitment to this system. I think that our children, well, I know that our children and our grandchildren are going to be impacted by the decision that you have to make. I talked about the established relationships that I have with the employees in our system that have evolved over the years. Because of that and because of the history that I have with the system, I think I'm uniquely qualified for this position over any other candidate. I think this is a time that we're going through where we need a steady hand on this system. I believe I'm battle tested. I believe you know how I'm going to respond in a crisis because we've dealt with some difficult issues. Excuse me. In closing, I strongly believe that we should stand tall, hands and heads held high, and unapologetically proclaim that we are Bossier Parish and we are Bossier Parish Schools, and we will rise and meet any challenge that we're confronted with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Give me a moment of personal privilege here. Get comfortable for a second. Thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate your answers to our questions, your knowledge, and just appreciate you going through this process. But I also want to tell you that 59 days, 11 hours, 31 minutes, and 44 seconds ago, I got a phone call. I'm going to say this again, 59 days, 17 hours, 31 minutes, and 52 seconds. A phone call, about the same time you got a phone call, that kind of changed everybody's daily duties. And you immediately thrusted to the position. You weren't even interim at the time. I was still calling you staff. But you jumped in, I think that Friday, we met at your office for probably about 5 hours. You asked me, well, during this meantime, who's going to do my job? I said, you. You get to do both of them. And I tell you, in all sincerity, you've done both of them. I know you've leaned on some people, but you've done us very proud. I know it hasn't been easy. We've had meetings with every member of the business community on top of running our system for the past 59 days, 11 hours, 32 minutes, and 46 seconds. I applaud you and thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you very much. Last time I said y'all could have a 5-minute break and it ended up being 12 minutes. This time we're going to stick to that 5 minute. We'll get started back here in 5 minutes.
Test.
Two down, one more to go, then we're going to executive session, so I'll call you in another hour.
going to ask for Mr. Victor A. Monero for our third interview of the evening and final interview of the evening.
Pronounce his name again. Manero? Manero?
Good afternoon, Mr. Monero. Kind of give you a rundown of how the interview's gonna go. We're gonna give you 5 minutes to do an introduction. After your 5-minute introduction, we're gonna start with Mr. Slack, and each board member will ask you one question. And then after the board members finish their one question, then Sonia Bales, our Public Relations Liaison Director, will ask you 2 questions that were presented at the BosierSchools.org website from the community, from the public. And then after those 2 questions, then you can do a closing, and then any other questions that the board members might have for you at that time.
Yes, sir.
And as soon as we get these handouts to everybody, we'll, yes, and Mr. Bullard is not here. I will be asking Mr. Bullard's question for him, so when it comes to me, I'll ask 2 questions. Mr. Bullard was ill this evening, but he's watching via YouTube, so he's
Yes, sir.
he can hear all the answers.
Yes, sir.
All right, you're up.
Thank you, board members, for this opportunity to interview for Bossier Superintendent. I sit here today with the assurance that I am ready to lead the district towards its goal of being the top performing district in the state. So the question is, why select Victor Monero as your next superintendent? First, I'm a current Bossier resident for 25 years. My wife, Melissa, an educator. Our oldest son, Jacob, a graduate of Airline High School. Our middle child, Zachary, who is autistic, is finishing his last year at Bossier High School, to which the board has honored Zachary multiple times for his academic accomplishments. Our youngest, Ava, is completing her last year at W.T. Lewis and will be attending Green Acres next year. So there's no doubt in the investment that my family has had in Bossier schools. Second reason you should select me as superintendent is my preparation and experience as an educational leader. After being a successful high school social studies teacher for 9 years, I became assistant principal at Southwood High School. After 4 years as assistant principal, I then became principal at Uri Drive Middle School. Serving 5 effective years as Uri Drive Middle School principal, I was promoted to the Director of Communications at the district level. With little training in mobilizing the community, I quickly learned how to plan and strategically think to tell the story of the district. This experience has laid the foundation for being able to effectively communicate with all internal and external stakeholders. It is my belief you need a superintendent that is, one, a good listener and also a communicator to mobilize the community to improve the achievement for all students. I currently serve as the executive director of Caddo Schools, where for the past 5 years I supervise and evaluate 11 high school principals and their school programs. Over these 5 years, I am proud of a number of accomplishments. One is leading the high school strategic plan, showing an increase in the district graduation rate. As our advanced placement success rate continued to improve and be recognized by the College Board, our district was invited to offer the new AP Capstone courses at 3 high schools to challenge our high-achieving students. With AP being one of many student opportunities, I am also responsible for CLEP, responsible for dual enrollment, supplemental choice allocation funds, and also Project Lead the Way. This past year, under my supervision, was added the funding streams of over $2 million, including Perkins, Career Technical Education, and also Jumpstart Summer. So I, like you, believe that the Bossier Parish school system is positioned to be the top performing district in the state of Louisiana. But to get there, it will take a leader who is positioned to respond to three questions. What do we need to do? How do we need to do it? And why is it worth doing? So let's begin with why. Why is because our current and new students coming to Bossier Parish are just as smart and capable as any other student in the state and nation. And if we work together to identify every opportunity to ensure the outcomes for each student and that they are maximized, our community, which we live in, will benefit. Next, what do we need to do to make this happen? I've centered on 4 core areas for this opportunity to focus on. One would be having the right people, the right leaders in place. 2, that all classrooms are staffed with highly skilled teachers. 3, that all students are supported to set goals that matter. And the 4th being the right resources are in place to guide teachers as they work to help students meet their goals. Finally, how do we make this happen? Well, as the word got out about my desire to be the next superintendent, I heard from current teachers, leaders, and parents, and it's centered on 3 key themes. The first theme was proactive and transparent decision-making processes. So with that, I say have the right people at the table and making timely, informed decisions. The second theme was clear communication and common messaging. Each staff member who plays a role in supporting the goals of the district, 1, they need to own the goals, and B, be able to communicate those goals. And then 3rd, differentiated supports. Each of the 12 districts and each school in the districts are unique with varying needs and factors that impact day-to-day work of a school. Therefore, we should not expect each school to have the same goals if we're not willing to support them in a way that will make the most difference for where they are compared to where they need to be. So with that, Board President, I'm ready for the first question.
Mr. Sly?
Monero, yes, sir. It is not doctor, no, sir.
Thank you for your time and qualifications. Obviously, well qualified. I just have 2 questions, or 1 question rather. It has 2 parts to it.
Okay.
During your time as a school administrator, what was your proudest achievement? And number 2, your greatest failure.
Greatest accomplishment and failure.
Yeah.
All right. So right now, I would say the greatest accomplishment right now, as I look in my current role, would be the district graduation rate in the district we're in, going from 13-14 grad rate up to last year's cohort rate. We're looking at 8 points of growth. And so in our world, we want to make sure that our students are graduating. And so with that graduation rate, it says a whole lot. And so that would be the greatest accomplishment as working through each school. Greatest failure, great question. And I would say that it's not a failure right now, but it is working with our T9 students, our transitional 9th grade students, in making sure we have the right supports in place to make sure that they catch up with their cohort year. Right now, we're trying different methods for that. One would be is we pulled 60 students from our high schools working at one school with specific English and math teachers. And right now, the biggest question is, are those right supports in place? And also, are the right staff in place? So right now, I would say that is right now to be continued, but that's where I'm going at. and we still have a few months to go. So not a failure, but still to be determined. Thank you.
Mr. Masseur?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Monero,
Mr. Sir.
I've known you for 20 years, maybe more.
Yes, sir.
We raised our children together, and I like to say I'm probably one of the few that has watched your youngest born and grow, Zachary, who I love to death.
Yes, you did.
Watched Veggie Tales with him for many episodes.
He may be watching on Ustream right now. Yes, sir.
And your son Jacob, to see how he's grown into such a young man, he has accomplished so much. Love your family. Was excited that you applied for this position.
Thank you, sir.
My question is very simple. You may have covered it in your opening statement, but as we elect a president for the United States, they're typically given 100 days grace, honeymoon period, where they get to do something or set the tone for their term.
Yes, sir.
And so, to keep it simple, in your first 100 days as superintendent, what would be your goals? What is your mission in order to make a mark on the system?
That's a great question, and even in the deliverable I gave you, in the bottom quartile there, we'll go ahead and you can refer back to that in the future. But the first 100 days is going to be critical. The engagement piece, I think, is so important because the end result of the 100 days would be a strategic plan to go forward. Okay, so with that, in that 100 days is you've got to get engagement, and the group that I would pull together, as you see under multiple listening sessions, would be, I'm looking at forming a new student advisory council that would give input, a new teacher advisory council, both of those groups made up of different grade levels and also the representatives from the 12 districts. The true question is, what will it take for our school system to become the top performing district in the state? Clearly, that is your mission, as I see. I love the mission. And for those of you that get away from top performing as far as numbers, when I associate the number of an SPS of an A, what that shows me is that more opportunities are gained for kids. And so when we see that top performing, that's the goal. So besides pulling together that student council, that teacher advisory council, we're looking at town hall meetings in each one of your districts to ask students, staff, and families to come together. We're asking for individual board sessions that I would meet, asking that same question, what will it take to become the top performing district? Also looking at individual principals and school leadership teams getting feedback. And the biggest part, again, would be business and community partners in the 12 districts. And so as we get that information, my questions also to them would be, what do you see our strengths in Bossier schools? What do you see our challenges in Bossier schools? What should we start doing and what should we stop doing? And then finally, what role do you see in the overall success? What role do you play in that success for Bossier schools? So in that 100 days would be listening, gathering data. The end result, Mr. Masseur, would be a strategic plan that would center on components to see that effectiveness. And I listed 5 of those. It clearly can grow depending on the input, but we're going to see academics, of course, would be number 1. But you're also looking at personnel, you're looking at finance, you're looking at technology, facilities. And so that right there would be that 100-day plan.
Thank you very much. And I did not see that involved treasures with that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Monero, welcome
Thank you.
to Bossier Parish. You're winning. You're wonderful one. One we love. I have one question for you, sir. With your individuals entering the field of education, some because of inadequate tons of stress and other issues, what would you do to increase the number of minority teachers in Bossier Parish?
Great question, Mr. Wiggins. I see it a couple different ways. One would be is, as leaders in schools, the first thing is, how do we show appreciation to our minority teachers and staff right now? That's huge, because that message then gets out. So the first part would be is, how do we treat our employees? Do we show that appreciation? Okay. Secondly would be is, are there ways to create incentives to go ahead and look at bringing in minority teachers and staff? Working right now with Louisiana Tech in looking at actual minority teachers, African American males, to go ahead and start in high school, start with dual enrollment of the teaching professions, and as they go ahead and take Ed 201 and Ed 202, getting, of course, dual enrollment credit, and they go to Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech has a program called MR, and they will go ahead and fund their entire education at Louisiana Tech. Then that buyback comes back to Bossier Schools to go ahead and sign them in as a teacher for X number of years. So a couple different ways to go ahead and recruit minority staff.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Darby?
Good evening, Mr. Monero.
Good evening.
There is a discussion about back to the basics. What is your philosophy on this topic?
Back to the basics. And back to the basics, I would see it as we go through teaching and we go through supporting the classroom. Everything is guided now that we are very, very close of having the Louisiana content standards, finishing up with biology. Now that we have the standards in place, we look at the curriculum that is there to support those standards for teachers. Then all of a sudden it gets back to making sure through professional learning communities, through leadership, that teachers have the tools, the curriculum, the supports to go ahead and teach students to meet those standards. So that's how I see that back to basic.
Thank you.
Mr. Bamberg?
Good evening, Mr. Monero.
Good evening, sir.
How was the hospitality drink? You ran there the longest, so.
You will have to put new carpet in because I walked the table a number of times, so I'm sorry about that.
Did you leave some food up there?
I just drank water. Did go to the bathroom a number of times also.
I was supposed to be meeting up there. Thanks for having interest in this position. Thanks for coming out and spending some time with us. My question is around change. Change is necessary in today's educational system. Oftentimes change has a direct effect on the morale of the ones that are asked to change. Entities outside of Bossier, however, have continually changed the landscape of the educational system and force us to make changes in our own system. Sometimes those are minute changes and other times are wholesale changes. The question is, what changes are you personally responsible for that affected your system in a positive manner while ensuring the morale of those not be affected?
I would say the changes of accountability. Accountability has changed over the years. And when you have staff and students meeting an expectation, and then we are raising those expectations, for example, to mastery, then you are setting a whole new landscape on expectations. And so as you're looking at those changes, there are certain people that are in classrooms that do not accept that change because we are putting more pressure on those particular individuals. And so you can handle it a couple different ways. You can support that group through meaningful conversations, through meaningful professional development. And if by some chance they don't, and it's in for kids, then we need to find someone else. So that would be the first part. The other part is staying up on the changes. I'll give you an example of ACT and work keeps. And we know work keeps being the new buzzword is the accountability and LDOE. We're looking at the concordance table of ACT score equals this work key score. And so through research here early this school year, they were looking to make a change because the expectation of work key score needed to be higher. And that change was going to impact during the school year. So when I saw that, one, immediately communicating with the network team, two, with the Bessie board member, is that I understand the research of ACT and work keys on that change, but we don't change it in the middle of the school year. And so then they look at the decision and it will affect 1920 school year and not during the middle. So there's a lot of different changes coming down. The thing is, one, communicating the change. Two would be is supporting the change. And if through all that support you can't do that, then you got to look and find the right people.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask Mr. Buller's question first.
Yes, sir.
And then I'll come back and ask mine. Mr. Buller's question is, as a school leader, have you had to address problems associated with an underperforming school, populated with students from a depressed or lower socioeconomic background? And number one, what changes did you implement to turn the performance around? And number two, what changes were successful and which were not?
Thank you. Absolutely, I have been associated with the type of school you're talking about, would be Booker T. Washington High School. And from a couple of years ago, not only did we merge two high schools, but we closed a high school. And so as you merged two high schools, and both of those having struggles in the area of performance, then as they merged, then we put in a system, teacher advancement program, also known as TAP. And that support came in a multitude of areas. One would be is creating an incentive for your highly skilled teachers to go to that particular school. Two would be that professional learning community of TAP, how it supports the school, how it supports the staff. And so I do have that, and of course Booker T. Washington in 1718 was a C, moving up from a D. So a lot of work there, a number of principal changes, but from the principal change, the leader makes a lot of that also. So constant support through not only the leader, but also through the teachers and staff. Also bringing in support of master teachers, making sure they are on the ground and they are not in the office down at central office, but they're actually working with that school, with those staff, that teachers, to make a difference.
Thank you. Next question that I have for you. Teachers within the Bossier Parish system are reporting that they feel undervalued and their voice is excluded from decision-making discussions. Realizing that employee morale is at a critical low right now, what are your plans for evaluating teacher voice within Bossier Parish and including teachers in the decision-making process?
That's a great question, and I think it's really an offshoot of Mr. Basura when he asked about the 100 days, and I've blended that in, the 100 days of actually giving teachers a voice and being able to listen to teachers, find out, going through, what are those strengths, what are those weaknesses, and really look at the supports that are built in place to increase morale on each campus. Clearly, May 4th is going to say a lot on teacher pay. I know that's a big, big issue as far as the morale of teachers, but it's not everything. I can show you research that shows that a valued leader is so much more to staff than actual pay. But we know that pay is significant. We know our teachers in the system in Bossier are due that. So May 4th will say a whole lot. But it's going back to giving that avenue. That teacher advisory council, I think, will be so important in my plan to go ahead and get the input and data that is needed to look at whether it's motivation, whether it's morale, whatever it may be to support based upon how they answer those questions.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Mr. Newman?
Mr. Monero, thank you for your time with us this evening. I also want to thank you for the career that you've already got in education and giving back to our young people. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Newman.
My question, excuse me. Focuses more on Jumpstart, CTE, vocational type. If you know, we have Bitsville here down the road, and the very fast progression of the non-traditional student going into the workforce. You know, they're not all graduating and going to college. A lot of them are going out and doing trade work, and from customer service to AC repair, automotive repair, and everything in between with their hands. It's not necessarily a traditional academic setting.
Yes, sir.
So I'd like to ask for your insight and your plan or vision for that CTE Jumpstart vocational student, because it's a continually growing population of our student body.
Great question, Mr. Newman, and I can really target two areas on that. And first, I can tell you I work very closely with Jada Spillers, and Bitsville is a wonderful place. Actually, Zachary goes over my son for 2 days out of the week in the culinary department, so I know the value of it. The key with first, the Jumpstart, is that how the students are scheduled at their home school to go ahead and look at and get into the classes at Bitsville. Block schedule is wonderful in that aspect, I will say that. The bigger thing would be is before even getting to that point as ninth graders, what do surveys look like on interest inventories for students to go ahead and have counselors guide students into a particular field, a particular Jumpstart. And so I think that is critical, that counselors have that ability through surveys, through actual counseling sessions to get them there, okay? The second part is, what are the Jumpstart pathways that have not even been discovered yet, okay? And so that part, and right down the road, Cyber Innovation actually has submitted a new cyber pathway. Now, not so much for the vocational, but also for those jobs that don't exist yet. And so I think BIP still needs to evolve into those new pathways as they're coming in. Cyber pathway, incredible, to where you could set up a lab, different particular set of network, and let them work on the artificial intelligence and the hacking and all that they do with cyber. Right now, I know y'all are wonderful in the STEM category with that. But I also see Jumpstart in that, how do you provide for the students that can't make it there due to their schedule, okay? So I'm in our second year with Jumpstart Summer. So we actually run a Jumpstart Summer program to where we have what you just said. We have AC, we have auto, we have digital media, we have pathways at 2 separate sites. And we actually, through Jumpstart Summer, have a course and a credential tied to that Jumpstart Summer, providing additional opportunities for students. And we actually give them a stipend for attending classes meeting requirements, but also when they earn the credential, they get a little step up on a stipend for a student attending Jumpstart Summer. So a couple different ways that I see with that addition and how we meet the needs for the future.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Buckhouse?
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Myers.
Appreciate your interest in being the superintendent for Bossier Parish.
Thank you.
One small question. The American School Counseling Association has developed a national model that, when adopted by school system, has shown to decrease behaviors on campus, increase test scores, and increase graduation rates. Among the recommendations in these guidelines, ASCA shows that counselors need to spend about 75% of their time in direct counseling services to see the best results. They also state there should be one counselor for every 250 students. Counselors in Bossier Parish hold the position of testing coordinator, which is an all-consuming position for 2 months of the school year. We have elementary counselors alone with 800 to 1,000 students. What is your stand on adopting the ASCA national model?
Oh, that would be great if it wasn't tied to money. But I would say this, Mr. Buckhouse, is that I've seen the recommendation, and even our parish, we're 1 to 400 on counselors, so I understand. And counselors, it seems, even with recent FAFSA that is required in high school, here's another item put on the plate. And so one would be is, and it kind of gets into a budget aspect in return on investment. And as we go through our budget, and we look very closely at every item, and we look at the return on investment as you are looking at the budget, can we look at a staffing allotment that can meet close to that recommendation? Right now, I don't have that answer, but through that 100-day plan, I'll have a lot more data to say, you know what, the positions that are here, I don't see the return on investment to where the counselors at 1 to 250 or 300 does, because I do know what counselors do, and I know how important they are. The other thing is looking at grants and additional monies to bring in outside groups like Career Compass. I work very hard bringing in Career Compass, where not only does Career Compass as an outside organization free up some of those counselor responsibilities, but you also tie in not only the college and where you're going to college as 12th graders and they're checking off, making sure, but also taking that load off of FAFSA, making sure that we try and free up counselors as much as possible. So one would be is actively looking at the budget, looking at return on investment, looking for the dollars, because the first thing in meeting that is how many more counselors do we need? And so from there is, does the budget support that or not? And so that would be my answer to that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Brotherson?
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms.
First of all, thank you for applying for this job. And thank you for letting those parents educate your children.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a son at Captain Shreve.
I know you do.
He speaks very highly of you.
Thank you.
Choosing the superintendent of Bossier Parish Schools is probably one of the biggest decisions and the most important decision that this board's going to make. Having said that, communication between the superintendent and the school board members is very important. As the new superintendent, how would you keep us all in the loop, and what steps would you take to make sure there is good communication between the board and the superintendent?
Great question. A couple different ways. One, of course, we're always tied to our cell phone, and knowing that the superintendent is on 24 hours, that's the first thing. But secondly would be is that, one, there's always an open line of communication. That you are not, the board is not finding out something that is in crisis, coming out on media before I'm letting you know that. So that's the first thing, is on those crisis type situations, always informing the board immediately so that you're not caught off guard. But for those items that are not crisis, but those things that the board needs to be informed of, one would be a weekly newsletter that would be coming to you that would give all the updates in the parish to go ahead and keep you informed of that. So that is critical. I know that Sonia Bales behind there is an active role in that too, and the communication between us would be very important too, making sure that we keep up those clear lines of communication. So one, of course, the wonderful cell phone, keeping that open line of communication up, letting me know immediately on crisis situations. But third would be that weekly newsletter, keeping you informed of all schools, of any updates.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dean?
Good evening, Mr. Nero. I want to thank you for your time and preparation you put in to speak with us tonight.
Thank you.
As a school district, we can spend lots of money on different programs and have the very best equipment. But in my opinion, I think teacher morale is very important for the success of that teacher's students. What would you do as superintendent to help boost teacher morale?
Well, one is lead by example. I think that is critical, is that employees need to see the superintendent. They need to make sure they see the value and appreciation for the hard work they do. I think that is so important. You've got a number of programs that are designed for teacher morale. I see the STAR Award where you go ahead and recognize employees That's one aspect. Making sure as schools have built in, how do you value those employees? How do you show that appreciation? There's a number of ways you do that. I think one, you take care of them professionally. How do you go ahead and support those employees? How do you professionally develop them? But the other would be is, how do you personally take care of them? Because they are the family. So when that crisis comes up, is how do you go ahead and take care of that particular employee and family? So one, appreciation, but making sure not only are they employed, but they're also family. Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you, President Cheatham. Good evening, Mr. Manera.
Good evening.
This is long, so I'll have to break it down a bit. What would you consider Bossier Parish Schools' two biggest challenges in each of the following categories? Students, employees, administrators, curriculum, and the school board. And then what skills or strengths do you possess to impact these challenges?
Okay, can you go over the categories one more time, please?
Students, employees, administrators, curriculum, and this board.
And the board at the end? Okay. Challenges for students. Challenges for students, I would say, is going to be is making sure that students are prepared for the workforce. That, to me, is one, we always want to see a graduation rate that improves, but really and truly, do we know as students leave our buildings, are they truly set up for college? Are they truly set up for that career? So I think that's the first challenge is getting back to Mr. Bachhaus about counseling and how important counseling truly is, okay? For employees right now, challenges are, of course, one would be the teacher pay. I mean, that clearly is where is critical right now, and you've mentioned it many times because of that, and some of the things that have happened this past year would be morale, okay? Challenges for administrators would be, I think it's similar to the employees. I don't see a difference of that, but communication would be critical. I think about Benton High School as it opens. It's not a challenge to open it, but are we set up to open that school? Because right after that is what is happening with Benton Middle, and then what is happening with Benton Elementary, as I understand, of that overcrowding. So we get into those challenges with administrators and what is the communication in regards to that. Curriculum right now is, and I understand Bossier Parish is doing a great job with supporting through Tier 1 curriculum. I think that's great. The curriculum would be now is, as you break down the curriculum to go ahead and meet the standards, are all staff trained for that and that support? I think that is the biggest thing with the curriculum. Besides, what is the answer for biology right now? And so that would be the curriculum piece. And for the board, the challenge would be is, one, selecting your superintendent. And the other would be is moving into the 19th school year with a new superintendent. What does that next step look like in meeting, to me, the goal of becoming the top performing school district in the state?
Ms. Bales?
Hi, Mr. Manera. This evening. We asked the last week of our public to submit questions that would be asked to all of our superintendent candidates. So these questions are coming from our community. I'm going to ask you two different ones. The first one being, where do you see opportunities for innovation within our parish?
Innovation, when I think of innovation, I think about the careers that are not in place right now. So I talked a little about the cybersecurity and in that world. And so Innovation as far as curriculum and courses would be that cyber for this area because it is that magnet in the community. The other would be meeting the needs of information technology. See Mr. Thompson back there, that's why I just picked that. Innovation to me with that is, and I'll give you an example, is the CompTIA framework on the industry-based credential. Instead of just BIPSTL having that program, in Caddo, I just finished 14 teachers being trained with CompTIA certification here right before spring break. My goal is for every classroom, and when I say every classroom, a classroom in every school to have that CompTIA teaching, and as that rolls through and the students are earning that credential, they almost become the Best Buy Geek Squad. And so when we're having technology issues, instead of calling the gentleman sitting down over here, putting in the work order and waiting for that staff to come out for those IT fundamentals that a true Geek Squad at the campus could fix, that would be one right there. Innovation for actual teachers would be is, are we meeting the demands of teaching as far as innovative style of teaching? And so I would say from, quote, technology to virtual. I know that Edgenuity has just purchased Odysseyware. So with our virtual school here in Bossier, what does innovation look like as we change from that platform to Edgenuity, meeting needs of students? So those are a couple areas.
Okay, thank you. Second question, how do you ensure the playing field is the same for those principals, teachers, and students in Title I schools versus those not in Title I schools?
Well, I will say this about Title I, and clearly Title I is there for equity. But not every Title I school should have the same supports. It depends on what is needed as you go through the right leaders, the right skilled teachers, the right programs, and the right supports. And that differentiated support, what does that look like? So clearly we know that there are certain schools, and we can look at, I looked at a couple schools in just third grade in proficiency. We're not even talking mastery, but proficiency, and we're talking from basic and below. And what we look at is that there is a huge disparity between students at Central Park to W.T. Lewis. Huge. And so Title I is there to put in additional supports, to go ahead and catch them up. Also, we look at early childhood and making sure that they are not only kindergarten ready, but as they're going through, getting into third grade, making sure that we increase that proficiency. So Title I is a valuable resource, and I can tell you from an equity standpoint, it's needed.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Ms. Bells. At this time, we'll allow you your 5-minute closing remarks.
Board President Cheatham and board members, I want to thank you for allowing me this opportunity to interview for the Bossier Superintendent. And as you go through today and tomorrow, making an informed decision on who the 2 finalists will be, I do want to reemphasize 3 things that matter for Bossier students to reach their potential and the district to be the top performing system in Louisiana. What do we need to do? How do we need to do it? And why it is worth doing. So again, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we have the right leaders in place. We want to make sure that all classrooms are staffed with highly skilled teachers, that all students supported to set goals that matter, and that the right resources are in place to guide teachers as they work to help students meet their goals. How we need to do it, again, is being proactive and transparent in decision making. We want to make sure that we have a clear communication and message. And we want to make sure, even from Ms. Bales, we want to make sure we have differentiated supports for those particular schools that need it. Why is it worth it? Well, this is the most important because we all have to believe that our current and new students coming to Bossier Parish are just as smart and capable as any other student in the state and nation. If we all work together to identify every opportunity to ensure the outcomes for each student are maximized, the community in which they live and work will benefit. So in closing, throughout my career as an educator, I've gained the knowledge, skills, and credentials necessary to serve as the next superintendent of Bossier Parish School System. These experiences, coupled with my dedication to the community I call home, I am confident that together we can do what it takes to see Bossier Schools re-recognized as the top performing school system in the state of Louisiana. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monero. We really appreciate your patience as you were the third and final interview of the night. We appreciate that, but we appreciate your interest in our job and your time in answering all of our questions today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Mr. Slack, you ready for item 3.01? I think so. Motion by Mr. Slack, second